Yes. Thank you. All right. I think I'm going to need Ed to help me on this, but at a recent OPA meeting, there was a lot of discussion about promotion of sergeants and lieutenants and the process. The union came with a lot of comments about this particular HR policy, and the city had a lot to say about where they thought changes were indicated. And the there have been now 2 meetings on it, right? Or is it 3 now?
Chair Fine, Board Member Brown, there was, I don't know if you could consider the first meeting a meeting because it simply was, it was brought up there and then tabled when the city's version of the policy and APOA's version of the policy were presented to us for review. There was subsequently another meeting, and at that meeting, sitting with the city attorneys, an attorney for the APOA, the president of the APOA, and myself, along with the OPA chair, Ms. Garcia. We spent the entire meeting discussing the APOA's position that for promotion, for the chief to have just cause to remove somebody from consideration for promotion, that the officer must have had 200 hours of suspension for use of force within the previous year. That was the standard that the APOA was presenting for the definition of just cause for the chief. And we spent the entire 2 hours discussing that provision. And subsequently, Dr. Brown's comments and considerations were not discussed at that meeting, but I did forward those to the city attorney's office and the APOA and their attorney for them to be considered. Subsequently, the 2 parties had a meeting on their own, and based upon my discussions with the president of the APOA, those discussions were not fruitful, so it appears that the decision is going to be made by the judge as to how that policy is shaped.
And do you expect that to happen on May 8th? Or before?
Chair Fine, this is not in front of Judge Bratt.
A different judge.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And is there the part that I've pointed out that isn't fleshed out is that they talk about community policing in the policy. They don't really define, well, they do define what it is, but there are no community members that are involved at all in the selection process or in developing the questions that are being used. There's no resource material related to community policing. There is nothing but just the language there, and it's just abandoned, and the policy then goes on talking about everything else. Do you know any way that we can get a place at the table? Because I think the whole policy has been sort of maybe co-opted over the 200 hours of the chief's ability to remove someone from consideration. Are the other issues going to be talked about that we have?
Chair Fine, Board Member Brown, I was given assurances by Ms. Holtz from the City Attorney's Office that your considerations would be, the points that you made would be considered.
Would we be invited to the meeting where they are considered? Do you know?
That I do not know.
What do you think our next step should be? Do you have an idea?
Chair Fine, Board Member Brown, I think your only outlet is to insist that it come back to OPA for consideration.
The policy comes back to OPA?
Yes.
Okay. Is there someone else would like to speak to that? Yeah.
Mr. Hernandez, do you have an idea you would like to share?
Yes, Chairwoman Fine and members of the board. There are two suggestions that I would have when it comes to your question about how to have input onto that policy. One would be that well, three, I guess. You could do that through the OPA meetings, or you could send a letter to me or to Ms. Holtz with your ideas. The third is that because this is a City of Albuquerque regulation as opposed to a police department standard operating procedure, it goes through a public hearing process. And so this will first go through the resolution process that all of the policies do with the Department of Justice, the APOA, and the Monitor. But after that, it will need to go to public hearing. So it will be noticed for public hearing, and then there will be an open meeting where anyone can contribute comments or suggestions, and then those will be considered before a final version is prepared. So those would be a few opportunities to provide that type of input.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
All right.
And I'm sorry, one other issue,
Yeah.
to address another question you had raised about when this might be resolved in terms of timing. It's my understanding that right now it's in that time period where we are supposed to the city is supposed to try to resolve objections raised by the APOA, but then it will need to go to the Monitor. And then the Monitor will have the 15-day period in the settlement agreement to resolve those disagreements. And if he approves the policy, then it will be for the APOA to raise objections with Judge Brack. And then it would be in Judge Brack's court to decide how to rule on those objections. But as far as it may get to Judge Brack, I may be able to get that answer while we're sitting here, but I think that if it's with us right now for resolution, that is a 15-day period. I just don't know where we are in the 15 days. And then it goes back to Dr. Ginger for a 15-day resolution period with him.
So we might write a letter to Ms. Holtz or Ms. Hernandez and copy Dr. Ginger so he knows our position on there too, and that would work. Okay? Okay.
Okay, so then that takes us